insights, and renewed connections to heritage. The constant stream of guests wasn't just about preserving the past. It was about ensuring that future generations would understand the depth and richness of their inheritance. In a world that often moved too fast to honor its elders or remember its history, Miss Juanita Washington's always full house stood as a testament to the power of intentional community and the sacred duty of preserving collective memory. Her hospitality wasn't just about opening her doors. It was about opening pathways to understanding, connection, and healing that extended far beyond the weathered walls of her Victorian home. Not everyone appreciated Miss Juanita's mission. City officials began receiving complaints about the increased traffic on Maple Street. Parking violations mounted, and some newer residents, mostly young professionals who had moved into the gentrifying neighborhood, petitioned the city council about the disruptive activities at the old Victorian house. "This is supposed to be a quiet residential area," complained Bradley Morrison, a software engineer who had moved in 6 months earlier. "The constant flow of cars and people is affecting our property values and quality of life." The city sent Inspector Janet Rodriguez to investigate potential zoning violations. As she walked up to Miss Juanita's porch on a Tuesday afternoon, she expected to find evidence of an illegal business operation. Instead, she discovered 12-year-old Aiden Brooks sitting with his great-grandmother, both poring over faded photographs of their ancestors who had worked on the Underground Railroad. "Ma'am," Inspector Rodriguez began hesitantly, "I'm here about some complaints regarding excessive activity at this residence." Miss Juanita invited her in for sweet tea and explained her mission. By the time the inspector left 2 hours later, she carried with her a photocopy of a document that proved her own great-great-grandmother had been a midwife who had delivered babies for both Black and Latino families in the early 1900s, a connection that had been lost to time until Miss Juanita's meticulous records revealed it. Miss Juanita's health began to decline just as external pressures mounted. A mild stroke in the spring left her speech slightly slurred and her memory occasionally foggy. The constant visitors, while energizing, were becoming physically exhausting for the aging woman. Dr. Angela Foster organized a meeting with regular visitors to discuss the situation. "We can't let this end with Miss Juanita," she said firmly. "This collection, this mission, it's bigger than any one person." The group included Marcus Thompson, now working on his doctorate, Destiny Williams, who had started a high school history club inspired by her visits, Pastor Jerome Williams from the local Baptist church, and Maria Santos, a documentary filmmaker who had been recording Miss Juanita's stories. "She's been carrying this burden alone for too long," observed Pastor Williams. "Scripture tells us that we're called to bear one another's burdens. It's time we stepped up." What emerged was a beautiful example of community organizing rooted in love and purpose. The visitors transformed from guests into guardians, each taking responsibility for different aspects of Miss Juanita's mission. Marcus established a digital archive, carefully scanning and cataloging documents with the help of graduate students from 3 local universities. Destiny recruited classmates to help with social media outreach and created a TikTok series called Ancestor Stories that went viral, drawing even more young people to the house. Maria began conducting filmed interviews with elderly visitors, ensuring their stories would be preserved even after they were gone. Pastor Williams organized the religious community to provide meals and practical support, while Dr. Foster secured a small grant to help with preservation materials and basic house maintenance. The transformation wasn't without its challenges. Personality conflicts arose over how to organize the collection, and some longtime visitors worried that increased structure would diminish the intimate, family-like atmosphere that made Miss Juanita's home special. As Miss Juanita's 79th birthday approached, she faced a crucial decision. The city had offered to purchase her home and relocate the collection to a proper archive facility. While this would solve the zoning issues and provide professional preservation standards, it would also end the organic, living nature of what she had created. "Museums are where things go to die," she said during a particularly difficult conversation with Dr. Foster. "What I've built here is alive. It breathes with every story shared, grows with every connection made." How do you put that behind glass cases and velvet ropes? The answer came from an unexpected source. Destiny Williams, now a freshman at Howard University, but still a regular visitor during breaks, proposed a hybrid solution. "What if we make this the first official community heritage house?" she suggested. Keep it in your home, Miss Juanita, but create a model that other communities can replicate. The community heritage house concept gained national attention after Maria's documentary premiered at the Sundance Film Festival. Applications for funding poured in from foundations interested in supporting grassroots historical preservation. The Ford Foundation provided a major grant that allowed Miss Juanita to hire a part-time coordinator and establish a small board of directors drawn from her regular visitors. More importantly, communities across the country began establishing their own heritage houses. Mrs. Chun in San Francisco's Chinatown opened her home to preserve Chinese-American immigrant stories. The Gonzalez family in Phoenix created a space for documenting Mexican-American experiences in the Southwest. The Lakota Cultural Center in South Dakota adapted the model for preserving Native American oral histories. The weathered Victorian house on Maple Street had seen better days, its paint peeling like old skin and its porch sagging under the weight of decades. Yet every evening, as the sun cast long shadows across the predominantly black neighborhood of Eastwood, Miss Juanita Washington's home glowed with warmth and activity. Cars lined the street, voices drifted through open windows, and the rich aroma of cornbread and collard greens beckoned passers-by. Neighbors often wondered about the constant stream of visitors. Some whispered that the 78-year-old woman was running an illegal boarding house. Others speculated about gambling or worse. But those who knew Miss Juanita understood that something far more profound was happening within those walls. What the community didn't fully grasp was that Miss Juanita's home had become an unofficial repository of Black history in America. Her modest living room contained thousands of photographs, letters, documents, and artifacts that chronicled the African-American experience from Reconstruction through the present day. Visitors came not just for her legendary sweet potato pie, but to contribute to and learn from this living archive. Marcus Thompson, a 25-year-old graduate student, discovered Miss Juanita's collection while researching his thesis on the Great Migration. "I was looking for my great-grandfather's military records from World War I," he explained, carefully handling a faded photograph of Black soldiers. Miss Juanita not only had his discharge papers, but she knew his story. She connected me with 3 other families whose ancestors served in the same regiment. The house served as an intersection where past and present converged. Elderly visitors brought shoeboxes filled with family photographs, letters from relatives who had moved north during the Great Migration, and stories passed down through generations. Younger guests arrived seeking connections to their heritage, guidance for academic research, or simply a sense of belonging in an increasingly disconnected world. Miss Juanita's role extended far beyond that of a mere collector. She was a griot in the truest sense, a keeper of oral traditions who could trace family lineages back generations and connect seemingly unrelated stories into a cohesive narrative of resilience and triumph. "She remembers everything," said Dr. Angela Foster, a historian from the local university who had become a regular visitor. When I brought her a photograph of an unknown woman from the 1940s, she immediately identified her as Ruby Mae Johnson, a seamstress who made dresses for Black women when department stores wouldn't serve them. Within minutes, she had connected Ruby Mae to 3 other families and revealed a network of Black female entrepreneurs that official records had overlooked. The constant flow of guests reflected the hunger in the African American community for authentic historical connection. In a nation where Black contributions were often minimized or erased from mainstream narratives, Miss Juanita's home provided a space where these stories could be preserved, shared, and celebrated. Perhaps most remarkably, Miss Juanita's house bridged generational divides that had grown increasingly wide in modern America. Teenagers who might never have engaged with their elders found themselves captivated by stories of ancestors who had overcome seemingly impossible odds. Destiny Williams, a high school senior, initially visited reluctantly, dragged by her grandmother to help organize old photographs. "I thought it would be boring," she admitted. But then Miss Juanita showed me pictures of teenage girls from the 1960s who looked just like me, and she told me how they had organized sit-ins and voter registration drives. It made me realize that activism wasn't something that just happened in history books. It was in my DNA. The house became a place where wisdom flowed in both directions. While elders shared historical knowledge and life lessons, Younger visitors brought technological skills that helped digitize precious documents and connect stories to broader historical context through online research. As word spread through social media and academic networks, Miss Juanita's home attracted visitors from across the country. Genealogists, historians, filmmakers, and families searching for their roots made pilgrimages to the modest house on Maple Street. What they found was more than just documents and photographs. They discovered a network of connections that revealed the hidden threads binding African American communities together. Miss Juanita has created something that no museum or university has managed to accomplish, observed Dr. James Mitchell, a curator from the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture. She's built a living, breathing archive that grows stronger with each visitor. Every person who walks through her door adds another piece to the puzzle of our collective story. Behind the constant activity lay a deeper purpose. Miss Juanita understood that she was racing against time. Every month brought news of another elder's passing, taking with them irreplaceable stories and connections. Her home had become a sanctuary where these narratives could be preserved before they disappeared forever. "I won't be here much longer," she said matter-of-factly, her weathered hands sorting through a box of World War II letters. "But these stories will outlive all of us. That's why my door stays open. Every visitor is both a student and a teacher, taking something precious with them and leaving something valuable behind." The afternoon light streaming through her windows illuminated dust motes that danced like spirits around the countless photographs lining her walls. Faces of ancestors who had survived slavery, Jim Crow, and countless other challenges. In Miss Juanita's home, these weren't merely historical artifacts. They were living presences that connected past struggles to present possibilities. As evening approached and the day's visitors began to leave, Miss Juanita would often stand on her sagging porch, watching cars pull away carrying newly discovered family stories. Academic. Each heritage house maintained its own unique character while following core principles Miss Juanita had developed. Open doors, intergenerational connection, community ownership, and the belief that everyone has a story worth preserving. 3 years later, Miss Juanita's health had stabilized, though she moved more slowly and needed afternoon naps. The house still buzzed with activity, but now the load was shared among dozens of committed volunteers. The dining room had been converted into a proper archive space, while the living room remained a place for storytelling and connection. On a crisp October afternoon, a familiar scene played out. Marcus Thompson, now Dr. Thompson and a professor of African American Studies, sat with a nervous undergraduate student who was researching her family's role in the civil rights movement. Destiny Williams, back for fall break, helped an elderly man digitize a collection of letters his father had written during the Korean War. Miss Juanita, settled in her favorite armchair, watched the activity with deep satisfaction. The house was fuller than ever, but it was no longer dependent on her alone. The mission had taken root in hearts and minds across the community, ensuring its continuation far beyond her own years. The secret behind why Miss Juanita's house was always full of guests ultimately reveals a fundamental truth about human nature. We all hunger for connection, meaning, and belonging. When someone creates a space where these needs can be met, where stories can be shared and burdens can be shared, people will always find their way to that door. In our own lives, we can ask ourselves, what doors are we keeping open? What stories are we preserving? What bridges are we building? And most importantly, what legacy are we inspiring others to carry forward? Miss Juanita Washington's house reminds us that the most powerful force in any community is not policy or program, but the simple decision of one person to open their heart and home to others. In doing so, she didn't just preserve the past. She created a blueprint for building stronger, more connected communities in the future.